We're going to move on now to international trade, which has gathered increasing attention as an engine for economic growth throughout the nation. Florida's always been a major hub of import and export activity, and Central Florida's contribution to international trade continues to grow. In fact, last year, Orange County government partnered with J.P. Chase to create the Central Florida International Trade Office, which is located at the National Entrepreneur Center. This office provides a single point of contact for import and export assistance in our region. There's information cards on your table that would provide more information on that office. With community support like that, a thriving international airport, and 2 seaports within a 2-hour drive of Central Florida, we are well positioned to accelerate our international trade capabilities. So on that topic, we're pleased to welcome our next 2 speakers who will share their perspectives on international trade within our region. Our first speaker on this topic will be Mr. Jim Bacchus, who is Greenberg-Traig's Chair of Global Practice. He chairs the Global Commission on Trade and Investment Policy for the International Chamber of Commerce. He is the former chair of the appellate body of the World Trade Organization, which, by the way, he was the only North American on the appellate body. Mr. Bacchus is a former member of Congress representing the 15th District of Florida, and he was a former special assistant to the U.S. Trade Representative of the Executive Office of the President of the United States. So would you please give a warm welcome to Mr. Jim Bacchus.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's good to be home again and not on an airplane. I want to begin by thanking Mayor Jacobs for her kind invitation. She continues to have my very strong support in all she tries to do for all of us. And I want to say hello to a few of my old friends and neighbors. Promise you I won't be seeking political contributions anymore. Several of my law partners at Greenberg-Traig have somehow come out to spend what we call non-billable time here this morning with us. And I want to assure all of you that none of them is to blame for anything I'm about to say. I am fortunate nowadays to wander the world trying to do good and perhaps make a living along the way. I've been in several dozen countries over the past year or so, and I'm working on trade, investment, sustainability, international business and economic issues of all kinds. I'm just back, for example, from a couple of weeks in Lima, Peru. I'm one of the legal advisors to the United Nations on the proposed climate treaty. And it's from that perspective that I have thought about what it is that I might say to all of you about how we might fit into the wider world. And I suppose that all I would want to say to you could be summed up in one statistic. 5% of the people in the world are Americans. This means that 95% are not. I know this is hard for Americans to believe, but let me repeat it. 5% of the people in the world are Americans. This means that 95% are not. Sean gave an outstanding presentation on what's happening in our domestic economy, and in response to a question, he observed that we are not immune to what happens globally in the global economy, and I would suggest, and he would probably agree, that that may be a bit of an understatement. Because all of those 95% and what they do and what they don't do affect us every day, whether we're engaged directly in what we call international trade or not. And that must affect us here in Orange County and in Central Florida in our planning and in our actions to seize our fair share of the future. Now, my observation from my travels and my work worldwide is that the world economy is increasingly connected through links in a hyper-connected global value chain of production of goods and services of all kinds. And increasingly, the economists tell us goods and services are more akin to different aspects of the same thing. So what does that imply for our thinking in going forward? I would suggest that it implies that we need to figure out ways to add value, and we need to support ways that add connections. Because if we add value and we add connections, we can be a greater part of the wider world, and we can perhaps seize more of our fair share of the value added in the world and create more prosperity here. I think this is a key in our efforts to promote economic diversity in Central Florida. How to add value? Well, for the longest time in Florida, we've sold this state as cheap land, cheap labor, low taxes, and plenty of sunshine. And we have been rewarded by becoming the world's capital in the growth in t-shirt shops. I think we have put that thinking behind us. You've heard half a dozen mentions already this morning of all the things we're doing here in healthcare, in education, in transportation, the medical city. We could mention everything UCF is doing in terms of advanced manufacturing, simulation training, so much more. Our airports, our seaports, our spaceport. All of this vindicates the strategy that we'll be hearing about this morning of reminding the world that Orlando, you don't know the half of it. And I would suggest that we need to continue to add value by improving our ability to seize more of the value added. And this means things that don't usually come under the purview of international trade. It means investing in children. It means investing in education at every level, and especially public education. It means investing in protecting our national resources, which are the bounty that brings people here in the first place. Certainly it means building on the tourism economy we have here, which is a shining example and a magnet to all the world, but it means also doing much more to develop the basic infrastructure and the human capital that will enable us to secure more of the value along these global value chains. Then there is the need to add connections. Well, certainly the infrastructure investments we make add connections. And we have a wonderful airport. We're building a better seaport. There are many ways in which we can invest in terms of infrastructure. Certainly our mayor knows that, given her background and her leadership on this issue. But in order for us to make more connections, much more must be done nationally to remove the obstacles to connections. Lowering barriers to trade is the easiest way we can create economic growth. In economic terms, it's a tax cut. A tariff is a tax. A non-tariff barrier to trade is a tax. Restrictions on investment are taxes. We lower barriers to trade and investment. We lower taxes. That creates economic growth. Right now, the Congress of the United States has a chance to give the President of the United States trade promotion authority. I've been a trade negotiator for this country. I can tell you no other country is going to give us their best offer if they think that the trade negotiating team for the United States is going to go home and have the Congress second guess that best offer and ask for more. So the President needs negotiating authority along the lines of what we've supported on a bipartisan basis dating back for nearly half a century. It was the Congress that invented trade promotion authority, and the Congress needs to come together now and give the President trade promotion authority. No president of any party should ever be without it. Not as fast as the world spins today. But right now, we can't move forward on many fronts on trade until the president has that authority. One of those fronts is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Another is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Still another, and probably the most important, and of course I have the acronym WTO written on my forehead. The most important, I would suggest, is the World Trading System itself under the WTO. We have concluded in Bali and are beginning to implement now a trade facilitation agreement that's going to cut red tape to trade all over the world and add $1 trillion over the next decade annually to the global economy. But that's just the start of what we could do. There are any other number of ways in which we could lower barriers to trade in goods and services that would redound to the benefit of Central Florida. So I would suggest that one of the things we should do here in Orange County is support these national efforts and encourage those we've entrusted with representing us in Washington in both parties to support them as well. I have been privileged to travel the world on behalf of my clients and in pursuit of many causes. And I've been able to see places I never dreamed I would see. When I was 12 years old and moved here and began at South Seminole Junior High School. But I have to say, I wouldn't trade our economic future for that of any other place in the world. We have a wonderful future. We have a wonderful economy. We have wonderful leadership. But even as we tell the world that Orlando, you don't know the half of it, we need to remind ourselves that we don't know the half of it. We have come as far as we have, in part because we've worked hard and we've had good leadership, but also in part because we have what economists call some comparative advantages. People want to be here. People want to come here. There's a reason that Florida just surpassed New York in population. What is the temperature today in Buffalo? But we can't rely solely on that. We cannot rely solely on that. We must make of Orlando, we must make of Florida a crossroads for the world, a model for all the world. And right now, we only know the half of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bacchus, and don't go too far. We're going to have you back up here for some questions in just a few minutes.